Alright, Elon, I'm going to post this video two key places, but I also have to elaborate on some personal experiences because I feel like that's all related to this, and there are some very corrupt things happening here. But the beautiful thing is that if you really want, it's not like you can just throw a target, it's a room full of targets, and you can just blindly just go after targets in each direction and just not make sense of the bigger picture. So much of this has to do with how we're utilizing different infrastructures in tandem. For example, we have a huge push right now talking about illegals in America, and a mass deportation strategy is being talked about. There will be some expenses for that, certainly. What you could do if you had a very sophisticated economy and you actually care about the crime and everything and you're tracking these things effectively, you know that you can figure out whether or not somebody is being paid in this country as an employee or consistently receiving checks from one party that make it look like they're receiving a regular paycheck. And then you can, through an identity profile, I've got this all designed out. Through an identity profile, you get the flags, because again, the banks need to be able to verify income. You want a consolidating place to build more advanced infrastructure like this. And so we need to be able to talk intelligibly about how we feather these things together. Also, with that, so you could just charge 5% more to everybody who's here illegally. And just say, as soon as you get here illegally, you'll be paying 5% less in taxes. And you can use that money and talk about how you're using that money to make immigration easier for people, and that'll make the audience very willing to support that. And they'll be like, well, I need to try to hurry up and get here legally, but at least they're making it easier for the next generation with the money that they're taking from this. That's part of an approach I like to call a purpose-defined tax system, where you're taking a tax for a specific purpose, and you're utilizing. Now, could those funds be short, and could you need other funds, slush funds, to divvy off to fill in the blanks and fill in the gaps? Yes, that's true. But if you move this purpose-defined tax system, then people are going to say, oh, I understand why I'm paying that tax. It's for this purpose. And again, what you can do with managing immigration policy is far less expensive, and you can really get people on board with a strategy more by managing it like that than you can by just saying, well, we're sorry that there are language barriers or whatever might have been a barrier that caused you to come here illegally because maybe it was too confusing, or you knew from other people that you talked to that you could get into the country this way. And, so that's not wrong. That's people trying to find an opportunity for their families, I'm sure, more often than not. And if we really care about the criminal piece, here's one of the things that I have to point out that's amazing about my plan, Elon. If you care about the criminal piece, our success in policing that on entry into our border is only as effective as the infrastructures our allies and enemies have. Every single nation in the world, every place somebody could come from, our ability to screen them when they come here is dependent on the data where they came from has. So you have to care about this bigger picture of the whole world. Again, why when you talk about this launch to sort of Americanize, but find commonality between government styles, but sort of Americanize the world, because we don't need to call it Americanizing. We're just protecting the ability for people to reach for their dreams throughout the world. And we're helping other governments to realize that when you position people to reach for their dreams, and you help to inspire them to help you grow your team, you're going to do more. You're going to have more economic opportunity. You're going to succeed more. You're going to grow your economy faster. There will be more opportunities. You'll be a stronger, more capable nation with more opportunities, more things that you can do to try to manage, cool monuments, cool culture you can promote, all kinds of things you can do. And so you have to care about this bigger picture when you're thinking about how we're going to get the data, and whether or not, other nation has to scan fingerprints before we can even figure out whether or not they have, and so they have somebody in our nation that was really from their nation. And so again, you have to care about all of these infrastructures. So if you go this advanced direction where you really utilize an identity grid, which houses biometrics through devices, people are going to want these devices. They allow them to do a lot of different things. As long as people can trust how this data is designed, then perfect. And I've got that piece of the puzzle. So often we talk about open source, and Elon, this is what the big picture thing is. We need to talk about this open source mesh so that we can expose opportunities for how to cleverly manage these things, like I was describing. But in order to do that 5% extra tax system, you have to have the bank systems tied together a specific way, so you can look for the data in a consistent place and find it. And then you can run analytics based upon this person that's paying, this account owner that's paying this other person, do they have a registered EIN number? Well, that's pretty clearly probably something. You can do extra code. That's the most straightforward way of figuring it out. But certainly there could be a law that's like, if you make, I don't know, less than, you got to be careful how you make these laws, because if you say, well, if you make less than $3,000 for an employer, you don't have to pay any tax, because then people will maybe rotate through jobs. The thing is that those jobs are usually pretty low paying, and so is that really that big of a deal in the economy anyway if you do something like that? But certainly you can look at if people are getting consistent paychecks from a bank account, whether or not it has an EIN number or not, and you can determine whether or not it's likely they should be paying tax. And you can certainly have an identity profile that tells you whether or not they're a US citizen, and if you tie all these systems together the right way, there's going to be no way that somebody can be here illegally and not be paying that extra 5% in tax. And it can go to build the wall or to build the advanced computer systems that actually keep us safe, because the wall doesn't really do very much. It really doesn't. You talk about the thing that I just talked about, that does far more. That's a much more creative way to approach. It doesn't even matter if somebody comes here illegally. We're going to be able to offset that anyway. And so why are you wasting resources on this approach when there's a far more intelligent approach which positions you for far more success and far more things? Because if you also care about so many other things, like, for example, safe voting and all of these things, you have to have these infrastructures as well anyway. Otherwise, you're just going to trust mail-in ballots, and then so people have problems with mail-in ballots because it's harder to verify ID. And you should build a digital system that can be trusted for this. The fact that Elon Musk is saying that we shouldn't trust that's red flag Elon Musk. What are you talking about, Elon? So I'm not sure if you're going to be the right person for this efficiency bureau if you don't understand the approach that I'm talking about, because I'm talking about building a more advanced approach to how we come together as a government to talk about these key pieces of data that we would need to utilize in different ways to have effective policy. And you want to talk about gun control? Gun control will never really be gun control unless you're taking into account psychology. So again, you have to, and you're talking about mental health, all of those things, you have to go this direction where you're standardizing medical records infrastructure and housing it in a single place so that you're positioned to run the analytics to have effective gun control in that context. And so, again, moving on to terrorist threats, or if somebody in a mental health situation is making threats to make bombs. You're in a position, or people who are, buying cough syrup or whatever to make fentanyl or drugs or whatever else, fentanyl or meth or whatever else. You're not policing that. But guess what the same thing policing that would do effectively? Positioning yourself to police that effectively also positions you to do more for small businesses than anything else you could probably do. Because you can automate all of their accounting, all of their, I know you said something about the IRS going away. I've been talking about this for 5 years. That's why I have a full and complete plan for how to really do this, pull it all together. Layers of separation of powers, just like in our government. And so, again, now you have the expertise in government protected, but there are different panels of expertise that could force a change for different reasons. One of those is the public sector and the government system, saying, hey, the needs of the people say you have to change and incorporate these approaches in your data strategy for that architecture. And then we're managing this grid, this open source grid, and we're positioned to have very deep, intelligent conversations about our opportunities to manage these things without mass deportation or some super expensive, far more naive approach. So this is frustrating to be in this position, especially when I know I've had certain friends fail me in the ways that I had. What's ironic about this is I had Andrew Semenitis tell me, at least you had people show you how to do things. Well, number one, Andrew, I can't remember your name now. I had a lot of negative things to sort through that I was taught too. And I didn't get to really, it was mostly blue collar jobs and sales that I was exposed to. And I liked thinking about engineering and, well, I liked thinking about psychology most. And I liked thinking about space. It wasn't really thinking about engineering when I was younger. It was thinking about space and how space is cool. And then psychology is very important, and there are clearly a lot of things that are being missed, and it causes problems in families. So I've thought of how to build these very complex tools that we should have an obligation to be excited to explain to the public how safe they can be and how they can work. One of those is the AI security shield that I talk about. Best thing you can do for an AI security shield is be able to, you could get this so sophisticated. You could know based upon GPS regions and where people are at, if there are cameras, and you could get people to be able to consolidate video footage of different places they've been if they wanted to. It would be interesting to have the system built that way. You just get the ability to access different clips from different systems based upon timestamps you were there. And you can have a log on your device or on your wearables that takes care of that information for you so that you can have this super advanced AI security shield. Also, when there's an investigation that you need, you've got a system built now that can track identities throughout a society, such that if there's a kidnapping or a terrorist threat, we can effectively do that with this very advanced infrastructure that's now been optimized for this, which also optimizes a financial transaction system so that you don't have to pull out your phone every time that you make a transaction. I mean, we can definitely get it to that point because the proximity would allow you to optimize how you're searching through biometrics, and you can then validate them on the devices in the store, not your own personal device. And so again, we can do all of those things. If there's an outbreak, you just have wipes by the payment stations, and so you just wipe it off each time and throw it in the garbage. Lots of ways we can figure out all of this stuff. Certainly safer than cash in that context, yeah, but think about how these infrastructures can be used for multiple things. Universal product coding, again, it automates accounting. You have to get all of the different producers and suppliers in the world to consolidate to a universal product coding standard. Right now, Target, Amazon, the big companies, they're okay with just doing it within their networks because all they really care about it for is for managing their business and reducing their costs. They don't care that if you build it the right way, it empowers all these accounting products which automate business processes for every single small business or business customer they have. And so they're doing more for their customers if they think bigger. Also, if you want to police bomb threats effectively, or people who might be building bombs or drones of scary complexity with components that should be now illegal, or get disapproved on the marketplace, like you find a security vulnerability in a particular microcontroller board, and then you say we have to take that off the market, or we have to make sure that board can't get this kind of code installed on it because it would be too dangerous. And so you've got to position your repository systems and all of these things to funnel into these layers so that you can have these advanced analytics even be possible. And this is the continual stage of where government is really at now. We're trying to have these very complex conversations about how we operate relevant to the technologies that we have and our opportunities there, as well as how we position ourselves to approach different problems that we could solve based upon the resources we have access to. I might have kind of said that in two different ways twice in a row, but that's where we're at as a government of the people, is we're trying to have those complex conversations. Now, I've known AI was going to get to this point where you'd have a way to access different models based upon context and things like that, and they're just now starting to get to that point where they realize that's the real opportunity, is you have to tweak different models for different subtle contexts and things like that, and then you can build these agents that select between the different contexts and execute tasks. But you got to position yourselves to regulate that effectively. You have to have some umbrellas that funnel together in order to do that. And while that's the safest way to do it, because you can have required libraries. Going back to my point of sale system on the advanced accounting and tracking of anybody who's trying to build a bomb, you need to build it such that every point of sale system, before you can even, in order for it to be a fully approved set of code that can be compiled to a device, it's got to have the correct access to the central banking infrastructure and the correct access to the accounting logging architecture. And so both of those sets of required libraries have to be included. You can build the private sector opportunity on top of those key layers, and the private sector can cross-manage those key layers with a cyber force. That's the best possible way you can do it. And then I've got my three-part separation of powers strategy for how you can actuate changes on those core layers by modifying the market addendums, which define the business rights to serve that market. It's effectively the Bill of Rights for businesses in this complex digital age where governments and businesses are now partnering to do advanced voting through the internet and things like that. And you have to have a model like this to manage key layers for security, as well as to promote this open source philosophy where we have these needs for our society, and it's not right for any one company to monopolize that. Here are these needs and these architectural goals. Here's the core layer that we build together to make that possible. And then here's the competition in the private sector to do that better than any of the competitors. And we'll try to control the market share, and we'll determine what the profit sharing should be for this. And then, yes, because I have this, again, going back to what Seminitis said, at least you had people show you things. Well, guess what? There's this amazingly huge role model system that you can build through this if you manage the tools that I've outlined to the best of your ability to maximize the opportunity. And that looks like channeling your industrial policy and key tax programs to offset retirement such that you can invest in different companies with great ideas And now we're in a position where you can do a lot of really advanced things with inspiring people to reach for different goals, different dreams that they might not otherwise have been exposed to. Because that's how we will be leading as a society. Like, we value the importance and the reality that people have to have the same opportunity to get exposed to some different things, which will always have some ebbs and flows, but at least if we're trying to get people exposure to more things in how we operate, which is 100% true with my interactive transcript design as it partners with a bid pitch exploration engine. So if you really want to create those role model opportunities, and then yes, the contracting with the president to highlight these industrial policy goals, give the private sector, Fortune 500 board, so many different companies can try to, you could build portals to alert Shark Tank and The Apprentice, like, hey, we have this great story or concept to promote this person. And then you're promoting the success stories as a government of the people. You figured out a way to do it. You let the president have some responsibilities in this overall paradigm, as I've outlined. And now you've got this much beautiful, stronger government of the people that cares about the role models piece. This is one of the reasons why I was so on fire to get this done, is because I listened to what Andy Semonitis said. And I took that to heart. And I was like, you know what, that is a factor. And I am lucky in some ways, even though there are these negative things that I have to sort through as well, I am fortunate to have had the positive things. So it puts me in a difficult position to have to acknowledge all of that, but that's what trying to be the best person you can be really looks like. You don't make excuses to say it's all right for you to explode on others in the ways that I was exploded on. That's been a very difficult thing for me to get over in my life. Very difficult. But it's not fair that that was forced on my stepdad in the ways it was. We need to get an answer for this continued chain of war. Some sort of answer that lasts in a permanent way. And then, yes, again, you have to care about the success of our other nations in order that enables our security. The tools they have enable some of our security. So we have to care about this bigger world picture, okay? And so again, the plan that I have, Elon, where you monetize these open source levels and you talk about managing those technologies democratically while still protecting the capitalist private sector opportunity, there's a best way to do it. You don't want to monopolize these things and say, well, this is the better direction for us to go, and since this business sold us on it first, they get all of it for the next 20 years. Every single American has to vote through this channel. That's not the way we launch something like this. The way we launch something like this is we say, hey, there's a better direction for us to go. It's more secure. It's better for voting systems. We have to make sure people can trust how secure it can be. We have to have an open source approach for that. But look at how my model allows you to piece together things based upon existing technologies and say, hey, I understand this approach over here and this approach over here, and I think if we combine these pieces, we'll have a new way of approaching this problem. And that makes it less jargon intensive. That makes it easier for you to explain what your approach is. It makes it much more accessible to the average person to be involved in these open source strategies. So I had somebody tell me that I was getting rid of open source or crushing it. I found the best way to monetize it, to make it the most valuable, most appreciated thing it can possibly be, because I've made it equivalent with the American identity and a key piece necessary for world peace. So you could launch this and you could bring the world into a bygone, forgotten glory age that maybe something happened and we're restarting this conversation somehow, in some way, to give this world this chance to move past this again. Whether that's a cosmically infinite force that's behind that or some alien force, I have my opinion there. I truly will tell you I believe it's the cosmically infinite force. I truly will tell you that I think that there is everlasting life after this, but there are people who are fighting against creating these opportunities for people and protecting people with these technologies. They're trying to say we should be more afraid of these technologies than hopeful for their potential, and that is all very wrong. So we need to recognize that we have the opportunity to solve these problems and get very serious about it. Get very serious about helping the public to follow along. Again, I've come up with the perfect approach to make this more accessible to the average person. So, Elon, you want to talk about what it takes to succeed at mental health and combining these medical records and how you could have this beautiful system for how we pivot certain architectures into a huger opportunity for how we include, for example, reflective journal ecosystems. I won't even get into the fact that the people making movies and video games have missed for the last 20 years for sure, that you could build these very interactive diagramming tools for journals, and journals can nest into different shapes and geometries to visualize the relationships between the information, and you can figure out if somebody is journaling about a lot of different things or a lot of related things that clearly illustrate that it's affecting their relationships in a profound way, and that will lead to depression and anxiety. You want to properly be correlating how life evolves and creates different types of subtle variations of anxiety and depression or PTSD. That's a factor in understanding which medication is going to work best for which person. That is definitely a factor. Right now, we're basically looking at people and getting frustrated with or people are looking at people and saying, I talk better than you in these ways, and because you talk this way, it means you have this imbalance in your brain. And that is literally what people are doing. And they're maybe looking at some visual cues or body language cues, but primarily it's about how people talk and what they're saying and if they deem that that person is delusional. But they don't actually try to understand their triggers or what they're dealing with, and then they end up, misdiagnosing people, and we end up giving them different medications to shut them up, and then the people just want to get out of there, and then they have something that kind of works for them, and they keep kind of taking it, and it just gets to be a messy system, and there's a much bigger opportunity. So again, going back, I jump around in this, but for the security for accounting, you get these required libraries and these point of sale systems, and then you have it depends on the business, but if you have a registered business, maybe you have to log a full year worth of transactions and financials, right? And so you have to have a system there are different ways that we can design peripherals, components to a system where companies log that information themselves, and we're always checking that for completeness and verifying that it can't be tampered with. And depending on the size of your business, you have to buy that equipment. We could all keep it in a cloud and just make that massive investment as a society ourselves, but some businesses, are going to use more of that system than others. Different ways that we can design those business models, and I've included all of that flexibility in my design. That's the whole point of my separation of powers model, is making sure that this authority to manage this is in the hands of the people and the private sector and the businesses that literally manage each component piece. And so we've got this triforce of expertise brought together in a more complete way than just our triforce of the government system that we have with the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, or the House, the Senate, and then the president with the veto authority. And so we've got this advanced, I know we have the judicial, legislative, and executive branch, and that's kind of how we frame our separation of powers, but the voting, how we separate the voting, is largely what enables that success, really. That's how we define that model. That's how that model can be changed. So that's one of the most important pieces there. That's why I modeled that in how we manage these advanced technologies with different levels of expertise. We have very specific expertise for a major market vertical, a Fortune 500 board, which has some executive and other very, very astute business knowledge, acumen. And then we have the needs of the people and how they feel about everything these two parties are doing. And then you've got this system where, because you don't want it to be too easy for the public to just force vulnerabilities into a platform, you do want it to be more protected with these two levels of expertise and how you can bring all kinds of expertise into how we're balancing this. And this should be pretty minimal, the amount of time the executives have to vote on anything. But think about this. This is actually positioning them to be aware of changes that might affect their business as well. And we need to be at this point, or we're never going to be thinking about how to feather together these management opportunities to do exactly like I said with the better way of managing immigration policy. Much more cost effective, much more useful, stronger system capabilities overall for how you can police other things in the future with the approach that I'm talking about. And so this is all a very profoundly intense set of things. But if we can't talk about this open source mesh, Elon Musk, if you don't position us for that, ultimately you're going to rob this nation of its biggest opportunity it's ever had, the most important way we could peacefully fight for peace and fight for the potential of every culture to have the right to have this. Because again, the success of anyone that we call allies or enemies, the success of our ability to maintain our security depends on their security. We're all in this together. Whether or not you are competent enough to admit it, it is true. Okay, so My plan, where you go to every nation and you say, we drive the valuation of this strategy, set of strategies on the world stage. We maximize how we promote the value of open source ideology, but we don't make it a not for profit. I wrestled with that in the first 2 years, 3 years of this. By 2023, I was very confident going the not profit direction wouldn't allow us to solve this wouldn't allow us this pathway to world peace. Right now, the way I have it framed, it's a pathway to world peace. We could drive the valuation of this to such an extent, we make a very compelling case. It's in everybody's best interests to move this direction. We could do that. We could be the most amazing, peaceful warrior team in all of history. And so, who's interested in being a part of that team? Who's more interested in being a part of that team than being willing to pull the trigger? Because being willing to pull the trigger, I know there are situations where it's necessary, but would you rather live being that person, or would you rather live being the person that I'm talking about, who fights for all of these potentials, for every other culture, and this bigger picture that we all share, and these opportunities that we have to work together on in order to realize? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those peaceful warriors who see this path to everlasting peace, to a more complex, more full and complete model for people to be involved in more ways. But it requires these partnerships. It requires these approaches for it to not be monopolized and to have the security, the huge priority that it needs to be, well discussed and understood at every point of vulnerability by a team of multiple companies and a cyber force, all cross-observing these very critical layers as we pull together this open source mesh and uncover unique opportunities and how we're able to connect these compartmentalized pieces for management opportunity, or to reduce costs, or to make a better world with more opportunity. Which again, you think about the way I'm talking about this role model piece with how I've designed utilizing this tax strategy in these mediums, in this pitch bid exploration engine, to offset retirement and benefit people financially for following along with the decisions we're trying to make. Thank you for trying to follow along with the decisions we're trying to make. Yes, we want you to have the chance to be rewarded for that. Thank you for following along with the decisions we're trying to make. Why would we not want to be that society that's thought of every one of the ways to make that possible, to boost retirement and reward the people who are thinking really deeply and trying to follow along with this? We need that team. We need to think about it that way. If we're not trying to do things like that, I will always argue we're not really trying. This is a factor in AI safety, is whether or not you can get people to want to do the work to understand these things. And we have to have a significant percentage of the population always want to understand these things. If we can work through cyclical goals and we can have companies come through this, you might have people get super rich and decide, well, we're going to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit, and we're going to create a project goal where we can have companies try to solve these problems again. And then you can pass off equities, or you can make sure that people are in key positions that will definitely protect these systems. I argue passing off the equity piece and having some extra profits for being one of the people who can reinvent the wheel and solve the problems again is an adequate reward, or is a valuable reward to try to think about how to incorporate. And if you can think about us trying to manage with all these project alert systems that you can build into these models that I have with my bid pitch exploration engine, and how it relates to key technologies that you might want alerts on relevant to different patents or different venture capitalist firms that want to invest in specific technologies. Now you've empowered the person who's trying to reach out to be scouted and recruited by more than just one company. Now all these companies can have a department where, yes, they may have their own research team, and their research team is working very hard on numerous approaches, but they also have maybe 2-3 employees that are scouring these sales leads and these pitch leads, that are looking for other people who have great ideas that they might want to recruit. Now your research team is much bigger, and you've pulled in all the most hungry people that are early in their careers or still students who are looking for a way to define themselves and set themselves apart. And now they're going to be chasing after a solution for you, basically working as an employee of your business for free until they get to the point where they're like, that's a great idea, we want to recruit you. And you see how that inspires people to reach for more? Again, I've thought about nesting this together in so many ways. This is the art of leadership we need. And so I'm begging people, Elon Musk for sure. I hope you understand these things. I get frustrated at times. I know you do too. But that's because we care, right? So I think you'll understand. Thank you for watching.